We just finished talking about a lot of adjustment brushes that we can use in Capture One to do a lot of things like painting exposures, white balance, just creating a really stylized effect in local areas instead of doing it globally. Let's take a look going forward at how to save some of the adjustments that you make globally in Capture One. Capture One, just like many other programs that do raw processing, have styles and presets. Now, styles and presets are really useful because if you ever apply something globally and you want to take those settings and apply to another set, it's like creating a bookmark for those settings. Now, when you look at Capture One in our interface, it's going to be right here next to the Details tab. And this is Local Adjustments, and then next to that is our Styles and Presets. So let me show you how this works if you're not familiar whatsoever with how to create a preset at all. Basically what you do is you select one of your images. For example, let's say that I have this image by Amanda Diaz, who is also such a good example because she has such a great color palette and color range with her work. And let's pretend for security purposes, I'll create a new variant like we did in our previous examples. And I'll go and do an adjustment. Let's say, for instance, theoretically speaking, I want to change my exposure. Let's say that I like a high contrast look, so I might bring my levels in. The left here in your levels is basically your shadows. It's where your shadows are in the information. The right side is my highlights. I noticed that my highlights seem to not have as much data, so I might go and bring these down. I might bring my shadows in as well, so already the before and after. This is not something I would obviously do on this image, but I'm just using it as a theoretical differentiator so I can show you what's going to happen when I save this style and apply it to another image. Next, let's say I go to my curve and change the color cast. Maybe I want it to be a little bit warmer, so I'll go to my blue channel. I will adjust it so it's a little bit warmer by bringing down the blue channel. When that happens, what happens is the blues are being taken away, so the result is it becomes warmer if you diminish blue from an image. Maybe I want to desaturate a little bit. Perfect. Then I can even come and maybe add a little color cast. So let's say this was a look, and by look I mean an overall appearance once the color cast is applied and the exposure and adjustments are done. And I want to save this. Well, this is where a lot of the processing, or I should say, the styles and presets come into use. Once I come into the Styles and Presets tab, all you need to do is the first part is come down and add a plus. This plus sign indicates that you want to add a new preset or a new style. And you notice all of these adjustments that we've done, for example, the exposure, the saturation, levels, curves, and color balance are all checked because we applied those settings in this image. I can say save, and it asks me to name that specific style. I'll name that RGG test style dot co-style. So this co-style is the extension for the style preset, and what that means is you can transfer this then to other programs in case you're on another desktop or another computer. Let's save. And it doesn't give me indication that it actually saved because it goes straight into this Manage Category area. And if I go to User Styles, it tells me the RGG test style is there. So here's how it works. Now that I have my style saved, I will go to another image. Let's say something like this. I'll use my drop-down menu. I'll go to my Styles library, And under user styles, it saves them. And so all I need to do is actually hover over it, and it's going to generate a preview. So as you notice, I have done a lot with a few of these. And so anytime I hover over any of those particular styles, it generates a preview in the preview pane. So that way I don't have to even click on any of them. I can just scroll through them. If I feel like I don't like any of them, I don't have to do it. The best part is if I do decide that I want this particular style, I can let go of my mouse or my tablet or whatever it is that you're working with to navigate through this program, and then it applies it. But it's not permanent because I can go back into each of these little panels, and it shows me the adjustments that I've made in case I want to undo any one in specific. If I want to quickly undo any particular one, all I need to do is come down here. On each of these little palettes, there's a reset dialog. And this reset dialog, or this reset icon, will reset that particular adjustment. So, for instance, I did the reset on my levels, but if I want to undo that, I can hit Command Z, and it brings it back as well. Another thing to note is under your built-in styles, where we have our user styles, as I hover over any of them, you'll notice that it tells me the settings that I've applied. So in case I'm not totally sure what happened and how much it's going to affect this image overall, it tells me. Also, it's important to note that over here under Manage, I have Stack Styles checked. What that means is if I do one preset or one style that changes exposure, and I save that, and then I do another one that's increasing saturation and save that separately, I can then add that on top of each other. Let me give you an example. I'll reset this particular image, and then I'll do one adjustment where I increase exposure. I'll go back into my styles and presets. I'll save this user style as exposure, and then hit save. And then I'll reset that, but this time I am going to increase my saturation. And I'm going to do this because there's going to be a discernible difference when I stack them on top of each other. So I'll go to my style, and this time when I save my style, I will save it as saturation, hit save. So what should happen now is as I stack both the adjustment for my exposure and my saturation on top of each other, it should look as we're anticipating. It should build on each other. So let's try it out. I'll go to my styles, user styles, I'll go to saturation first, and then I'll come back and then go to user styles and exposure. So what happened? It increased exposure and saturation separately, but it added on top of each other instead of replaced it. And you know this because it tells you my applied styles are exposure and saturation. So it added in layers. So you can even layer a lot of this. So if you feel like you want to add a color tone and save that as a particular style, and then combine that with other styles, it allows you to do so. The other option is if you didn't have it checked, and then I go ahead and reset this, and if I add them now, what happens is it's not going to stack on each other. For example, I did exposure, and then saturation. So you see how that exposure shift just went away, but the saturation itself took its place. So I prefer personally to leave them off in terms of stack styles, because the way that I usually style is predominantly with creating a really complex look and then saving that as one big preset. And that way, I can then just switch between them and scroll through and pick the one that I want specifically. Now, I would maybe even recommend doing a couple of things. maybe even having certain styles that only do one thing, like maybe exposure adjustments, and then having a couple of other styles that totally transform the look altogether. The next thing that we can do is under Manage, you can delete user style and delete any one that you feel like you're not using anymore, which makes it really easy because you don't have to go and find them anywhere. You can quickly just go in and just take them out. So if I remove test 1, it'll ask me if I'm going to delete it. I'll say yes. I can even import them in case I want to import particular styles back into Capture One. And the styles library also has built-in styles. So in case you feel like you want to use some of these predetermined black and white filters, it comes with a few that gives you a few options. I've always learned that when you're looking at some of these styles as we're going through them, it opens my mind up to ideas. Now, I'm the type of visual artist who seems to get inspired by seeing other looks, but sometimes having a lot of choice isn't a good thing. I know some people who always tell me that when they get overwhelmed by looking at a lot of creatives and different artists and different inspirations, it confuses them further. So, this is just the outlook depending on which way you're going. But if you know you're the type of person who gets inspired by particular looks, this would be a good way to scroll through and see how they look like. Another really important feature to note is that styles are important because even though you might not use them for anything else, let's say I create something beautiful like this. Like maybe I've come up with a really specific color tone for this particular image. If I save that as a style, it will look completely different on another image, which might not be a good thing, but it might be a brilliant thing. It might come up with avenues that you wouldn't have even considered, maybe even ways that allow you to explore and take even further or even dial back on. So it's a good reference point and a starting point. Now these preset libraries are very similar in the sense that they do a lot of automated color toning. So for instance, if I go ahead and reset this area here and come down to my presets category and I do a black and white, let's say I do red, yellow 2. And I come into some of these areas here. Let me go ahead and add a black and white filter here. So you notice that it actually did a black and white conversion for us. And so this is a wonderful area to also go in and see exactly what type of looks that it will allow you to play with. And finally, they also have a lot of other things like having automated curves where in case you don't want to manually go and add things, you can go and stack styles here. Then finally, under built-in presets, you can keep on adding multiple exposures and curves and grain. So ultimately, I think that styles and presets summed up is a great way of not only saving some of the looks you've done, but being inspired by some of the previous looks that you've already accomplished on older photographs. But in any case, it makes it easy to save anything that you've done color-wise and exposure-wise. So now that we've talked about styles and presets, let's talk about exporting images from Capture One into other various formats like JPEGs, PSDs, and Photoshop by using a lot of process recipes. That way we can get the most of quickly expediting our workflow.